that's down low.
Hi, I'm Doug Hoyt from Sounds Like Music Recording Studio, and you're watching Musicians on the Record. Hit it.
If somebody wants to study recording engineering, because you've taught that for so long, what's something that they need to sort of prep for or look for?
That's a really good question too, because over the years doing it, I would get students that would come in, and about halfway through the semester, they either found themselves falling so much in love with it they couldn't get enough of it, or realizing that it was the last thing in the world they thought it was going to be, and they couldn't get away from it fast enough. So I saw both ends of that spectrum. Basically, when you are dealing with audio engineering, there's a lot of technical aspects to it. And if you do end up going to a school like NESCOM or one of the many other great recording schools across the country, they need to understand that there's a lot of work involved, and time management becomes key as well. The studying, doing all the work that's put. We'd always assign mixes and give the students a block time to go in and work on them, and make sure that when they're actually working on their mixes during that block time, that they were actually working and actually doing it, and playing around with the gear and figuring out what works. There's a lot of distractions when you're taking classes. Sorry, I didn't mean to scratch the mic.
That's fine.
So that becomes something that each individual needs to get into the routine of doing if they go to a recording school. And they're very helpful. I didn't have such a thing when I was younger. I had to learn simply by trial and error. Why is that piece of gear smoking over there? Oh, I did something wrong to it, but I don't know why. And at that time, there was no internet to be able to look up and say, geez, how could I do this differently? You ask somebody who maybe had been doing it a while longer. Somebody had some more experience.
Sure. So we talked about your first kit and the guitar and the music. What was the first kind of engineering recording board that you sort of worked on and recorded for somebody?
Honestly, that little Mackie sitting right there that still works like a champ.
Okay.
So it's one of those, they broke a lot of ground rules when they made that little mixer.
Okay. Yeah.
And I think that ended up winning a Grammy for a classical recording back when that was released.
Awesome.
So that would be probably one of the oldest pieces as far as when I started the Sounds Like Music Recording Studio aspect of
Nice.
my journey.
Nice. Yeah.
But from that, I've simply gone on to be using a lot of other pieces of gear, like whether it was API at the school. At one point, was the first school I believe in the country to have a DigiDesign icon, and that's also dating myself at that point, because it's DigiDesign. It wasn't Avid, and now Pro Tools is Avid, and this was a proprietary board designed to be used for Pro Tools.
Yep. Okay.
Yeah.
So can you say a little bit more about what the benefit, because anybody with a laptop these days and a DAW and a microphone feels like they can kind of record themselves. Say a little bit more, and they can, just logistically, but say a little bit more the benefit of calling you and coming to work with you for recording and getting their sound right.
Well, you're right. Everybody has access their phone. Most people have a cell phone. You can record on your cell phone. When I started doing this, probably one of my first pieces of multi-track recording was a Fostex cassette 4-track machine, which I probably spent around $600 for 4 tracks. Nowadays, it's really easy to record. You can get really good recordings with some of the free, what we call DAWs, digital audio workstations, whether it be a GarageBand with a Mac. You can get great recordings using that. I used to teach a lot of students. I taught the Pro Tools software for years, and I would get a lot of students that actually owned Pro Tools before they took the class. And not once did I teach a student that already owned it. Not once did I do that, where at one point or many points during the semester they went, oh, that's what that's for.
Right.
So it doesn't mean they weren't using Pro Tools. They were.
Yeah.
But when you take a class or you enlist the help of somebody that's been doing it a while longer, their experience comes to the table. So that means they've already made some of the mistakes that maybe you're still making, and maybe they figured it out. That's the hope, anyway.
Yes.
Somebody like me, honestly too, it's just years of listening and years of recording and listening and recording, and you can't, if you take care of your ears,
Yes.
you just keep getting hopefully better and better. You should have what we would call a head start on somebody that's only been around it, say, for 5 years or something. And I think that inevitably does show. Everybody, like we were saying, they do have the opportunity, and it can be a lot less costly to record by yourself.
True.
But I think most anybody that does their research and goes to record at a reputable recording studio would be pretty happy with the end result, and probably scratch their head and go, "Oh, well, that's how you do that."
Right.
So
So the wisdom of that experience and that time, you can't fake that. You can't sort of do that on your own.
No, because it's like I've been doing this now 30 years or so, and if not more, and I never stopped learning. I'm still learning stuff every day. I was working earlier before you all showed up, and I was scratching my head going, "Oh, why don't I try that? That works," because everything's different. There's no one set way to do anything.
Yeah.
So
I usually ask folks, what are they still working on or learning musically? But I get to ask you both questions. What are you learning craft-wise in your playing? And what are you learning of all of this, recording stuff?
Recording stuff that's an easy question. I'm still constantly learning with recording stuff. Every time a new piece comes out, or in my case these days, I'm trying to do a lot. I'm trying to dial things back and do a lot less convoluted engineering and try to get to the basics a little more. And I think it's part of human nature. The more options that we have, we tend to, it goes right back to those great sounding Beatles recordings. They didn't have a lot of options, but they made the most out of what they had. So that's kind of my approach with that. Musician wise, I'm always trying to craft songs. I'm always trying to stay as fluid as I can be. I'm no virtuoso by any means on the guitar at all. Remember, I'm mostly a drummer that got tired of bands breaking up around me, so I picked a guitar. So I'm that guy. Drumming wise, lately, last month or so, I've got back to holding my stick's traditional grip, which I started doing and then got away with it to the matched grip. So I've been spending a lot of my time, just whether I'm watching a movie or listening to music and going along, getting my left hand to be able to move again. And it's been fun for me to
That's great.
Again, I wouldn't do a session like that yet because I left that style of playing for years. But
it's a little more practice.
And I like challenge. I like to be. It's not easy to. It's not hard to find a challenge for me. So.
Well, it's great though because you're always learning. And I imagine, especially with the recording equipment too, the technology just keeps changing all the time, right?
Yeah, but as much as I like to stay up on everything, I try not to fall into that trap of chasing it. At the when it's all said and done, when you hit play, do you have something that's going to move you in some way? Does it make you excited? Does it make you sad? Does it remind you of something? Does it make you want to play it again? I think that's the best thing right there. If you listen to a song and the first thing you want to do when it gets over is hear it again, then you're
Absolutely.
You're dialing it in right at that point.
Yeah, when that earworm gets in there.
When that earworm gets in there,
Yes.
exactly right. And I think that most engineers, if they're doing their job right, they need to learn to get out of the way of the gear, and it's nice to have it, but when it's all said and done, do you have a product? Do you have a song?
Right, exactly. Yeah, and it's all about the song.
Right. If that's what you're working on.
That's right. Yes. Yeah. And so, can we talk a little bit about the gear? You got some great gear here, and both musically instruments and the recording equipment. Can you tell us about your gear?
Yeah. Again, I try to keep things pretty basic. I've got a Digi 192 that doesn't get used a lot these days for your audio engineers. I keep things pretty simple. I use everything from Pro Tools to Presonus Studio One, which actually is a really nice DAW, very very user friendly. So if you're looking to get find a DAW or a recording platform that works for you, that you don't have to spend all kinds of times watching tutorials or reading manuals. I think if it's user friendly, then you're going to get to the meat and potatoes of what you want to do, and that's record music. I keep things pretty basic for my playback systems. I have an old Hafler amp that I use for my monitors. I have some small Genelecs there that I use, and some 40-year-old Snell acoustic speakers that when I want to listen to something that would have been on like a hi-fi system back in the late 70s, that's the sound. So I listen to a lot of my vinyl through that well for my playback. For my monitoring. The gear and stuff, like I said, I've got an old 1968 Ludwig. It looks a lot like Ringo's, but it's an oyster blue. I believe he had an oyster black. And I've just acquired a 5x14 gold sparkle Ludwig Jazz Festival drum, which I'm really liking a lot these days. I've got a 6.5x14 super sensitive Ludwig snare drum. I've got some Peisty cymbals. I've got some old Zildjian cymbals that I use as well. For the guitars, I have an old Blues DeVille, which I bought new, but now is they actually make a retro version of that. So there's a make you feel old moment when something you bought new all of a sudden becomes vintage. I use a combination of Fender and Marshall amps here. I've got a Fender Rhodes stage piano that I have in the studio for anybody to use when they come here.
That's awesome. Yeah.
I also have a Gibson SG. I have a Fender Stratocaster that I use for certain things. I have a Fender Telecaster that I use. Fender P-Bass for the bass, and I have a trusty Takamine acoustic guitar that I've had now for about 16 years or so, 16, 17 years. That I use most every day.
Yeah, amazing. So this is like a full-service studio. A musician could just show up, and you got all the gear that they need.
All you got to do is bring the idea.
That's
you got
right.
the idea for the song. You don't even have to bring your guitar or anything unless you want to.
So yeah, right. If they want to, if they have their favorite, obviously guitar, that's accommodated here as well,
Sure.
right? Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. Awesome. Great. Let me ask you. Your ear is obviously very trained, both musically and on, all of the recording equipment. What's it like for you just listening to the radio or going to a movie? Are you like analyzing some of that stuff and kind of go, well, how did they record this thing, right?
Well, I've been blessed with the ability to enjoy music, enjoy movies, watch television shows, and really just be in awe of how advanced and how much better television shows sound compared to say 40 years ago, and the surround sound mixes that you hear from television shows, or even watching a football game in surround sound. I just think that's amazing. I do probably analyze it more than most. I might pick up on things that other people might not pick up on. But for the most part, I just enjoy it. I don't go down that road of being, stuck analyzing to the point where I can't enjoy it. I switch that part of my brain off, and I just sit back and I just let it hit me. I love listening to music.
Yeah, so you can go with it, or it might inspire you of like...
Mostly it's an inspiration.
Yeah.
I'll hear something. Before I do sessions, I'll talk to a client and say, well, what do you envision this to sound like? What do you have a certain sound? And then I'll research that sound. And then I'll try to dial that in as best I can. Or maybe they just want to borrow from it. Maybe they don't want it to mimic it because that's already been done. But I don't know how many times I'll listen to something and I'll think, wow, that snare drum is just one of the best sounding snare drums I've ever heard. How'd they do that? I was listening to Bruce Springsteen's The Rising the other day, and some of the best snare drums ever recorded, I believe, was on that album.
And was that Max Weinberg?
Yeah,
sure.
Yep,
Right.
the engineer was Brendan O'Brien, I believe, on
Amazing.
that particular recording, and I'm just in awe of some of the sounds that they got for that. And I'll sit there and focus on the snare drum.
Right.
I love the album as a whole, but the engineering side of me will grab something like that and go, well, geez, I don't know how they did that. Okay. Ultimately, it was a great drummer in a great sounding room.
Exactly.
So there you go.
Right. That's where it comes down to, right? As well as the sound guy. So, one of the other things we talk about on this show too, Doug, is around the business of music and helping musicians sort of prepare for that, whether they want to be on stage or behind the board or whatever. Can you give us a glimpse in the business wise of music? Because things have changed a lot since what
Yes,
we're
they
talking
have.
about with the
Yeah,
70s.
sure they
Of
have.
what's kind of the process of, say, I wanted to hire you to record an EP. How does that process even start?
Usually it comes down to a couple of things, and it's, do you want to book out hourly rates or do you want to book a project? Okay, so that project could go over the course of a week or could go over a course of a month.
Okay.
Hourly rates, again, you could just come in for a couple of hours and knock something out. And the other thing that I offer here at the studio is a day rate. You would just want to come in for a day. I don't recommend you going much more than 8 hours
Okay.
because you end up burning out.
Sure.
You know, at some
Kinda like
point,
with anything,
at some
right?
point, fatigue sets in,
Sure.
no matter who you are.
Right.
For all, and for me as well.
Sure.
You know, so
Bet.
yeah.
Okay. And for somebody who's wanting to, you know, studying like at NESCOM or another recording kind of place, and they have dreams of having their own studio or working for a studio, what advice would you give them?
Mostly the advice I would say is you want to be passionate enough about it that it's not work to you. That it's something that you're living, eating, breathing, and sleeping, as I used to say to the students. You need to be thinking about it a lot. It needs to kind of be part of you. That goes a long way, because I think that makes it so that you are so focused on it and you're enjoying to do it. People want to work with people who enjoy the work. They want to work with people who are positive. They want to work with people who not only know what they're doing, but are good with other people and are able to, you know, psychologically work with them.
Yes.
and you tell them the hard truths sometimes without being offensive and things like that. The nitty gritty that I used to say, to some of the students. But also ultimately just wanting to do it so much that you show up. You're there. You're not phoning anything in, as we used to say, to people.
Yeah, and that made me think about some of the power of networking and just being able to hang with people,
Right.
and because it's not all just about the buttons on the board or how well you can play the guitar or whatever. It's kind of just being a good person and hanging. Can you talk a little bit about that power of networking and how that has helped you, and or what you might advise somebody
Yeah,
else?
I mean, if you walk into a job or any studio, on the first day, and you assume that you're going to be in a certain role, maybe the role you want to be at in the future, but you say, this is the day I'm going to be there, you could overstep a bounds. And some of that stuff was always hard to teach. It's some of this common sense stuff that you kind of have to sit back and see the big picture of, and knowing your place when you go to work with somebody, and again, there's no real cut and dry answer here. Are you working with somebody that's going to be able to, be relaxed when you're saying, okay, we got to stop here because the guitar's not in tune anymore.
Right.
Maybe the temperature changed. Maybe,
Yeah.
something slowed something down.
Sure.
And understand that also it's a high stressful situation for a lot of people, and they might be more stressed than they normally would be. I'm talking about the artist,
Sure.
So
Sure.
understanding that and seeing the big picture, I think, is something that's crucial when you're looking to get a job either at a studio or whether you're doing live work for somebody.
Yeah.
Some of the students that I've had in the past have gone on major tours,
Mhm.
whether that's a major tour with Elton John or
Wow.
or whoever,
And
or
mixing their
Tool or
sound.
whatever. Yeah, right. Sure. Or just being what you'd call a roadie or whatever, or a tech.
Right.
But somebody that's obviously showing up,
Yeah.
somebody that's able to arrive and be there and work. And until it's all said and done at the end of the day, and they're looking for more. And yeah, there's a lot of drive, and that's just not music. That's in any business.
Sure,
right?
sure. But you might not get the Elton John gig day one in the studio, right? You might have to help out, clean up or
People
something.
that are hired for those jobs, there's a pretty crucial or a vigorous, what's the word? Interview process that goes along. Places like Clare Brothers that hire.
Yeah.
engineering techs
Okay.
and what you would call a roadie. That's an old school term, I guess,
Right.
these days. But anyways, those people do only hire people that they sense are going to be able to be giving, their 100% all the time.
Right. Has that ever been a thought for you, or have you always said, I want my own studio?
Honestly, there's so many factors that come into, I think, the paths that we take. I have a family. You can't always be on the road, with that. You can't always. And the path I chose was to stay a little more local. And I dialed it back a little bit on that end. I like Maine. I like being here. South Portland and Portland in general is a great little city. It's not Boston. It's not New York. It's just right for me. I love it. There are a lot of job opportunities for, say, students that go off into audio engineering. Not only, say, around parts like this, but most of them have to go to either New York City or up to San Francisco or Los Angeles or someplace like that. So, you're not saying you can't do it, if you're a little more tied down, but they certainly, being able to just have to rely on yourself is definitely a bonus in that regard.
Well, and you get to be your own boss here.
Well, sure you do,
and
right.
That's a commitment to yourself, to your family, to be here, and it's working, which is really great.
Right.
Two questions. One, and I've heard that you go in and you record the drums first, and I don't know if you do it this way or not, but I've always wondered why. But also, I remember Taylor Hawkins talking about, all of his drums being muffled and taped and blue gaff or whatever, and just working at that or struggling with, it's hard being in the studio.
Mm-hmm.
It's not easy.
No.
So can you say a little bit more, just because I'm a drum geek, of the drum parts, and does it work like that, or...
I learned early on the drums, the drum sound you get is usually the part of the song that kind of is a telltale of whether you actually went to a studio or whether you recorded it.
Okay. Yeah. Right.
In your living room. Now, that being said, because of technology, there are home recordings being done today that could have never have been done 20 years ago as a result. Not the least of which, anybody can go on the internet and look up drum tutorials on how to record drums, and they can sit there all day long and get very great ideas. I like a minimal approach. Being a fan of the classic rock stuff like The Who, I believe most all those albums, there were only 3 to 4 mics on the drums at any given time.
Wow. So a lot of ambient sound.
A lot of ambient sound. So I like that. I certainly am not opposed to closed miking as well. Usually the drums are recorded first, along with a bass guitar. That's something that I've done for years and years, and a lot of people do that. I can tell you on one of the last projects that I did record on, I was also hired to play drums on, and that was the Laurie Jones album. And if anybody listens to that album, I can tell you that the drums were all recorded after the main guitar parts and the scratch vocals. So drums were recorded after, but we used a click track.
I see.
So that goes into the other aspect of, can you play to a click track?
Right.
And that's not always easy, and that's taken me years to be able to not sound like I'm playing to a click track.
Right. Definitely can be a challenge.
It can be a challenge, and you kind of, there's and it also kind of falls into this other thing of, how whatever you're working on, how precise does that piece of music need to be? Some pieces of music needs to be what they call dead on the grid.
Sure.
Just smack dab on the grid.
Yes.
You're setting up to a click track, you're staying right there. Other pieces of music can float around it a little bit and give it some energy and personality.
So you can be a little bit behind or ahead of the beat kind of thing.
Yeah.
But to record the drums first, you kind of need to have some kind of structure of what the song is going to be, right?
Yes.
Somebody has to have written that.
Yes.
Because I remember seeing an interview with Stuart Copeland of the Police, and him, he would go in and do his 1 or 2 takes, and then he was gone.
Yeah. A lot of times what most studios will do is they will record or do a scratch recording and have some other musicians play at the same time, so the song structure stays intact. and they might not use what they did, but they might use the drums, and then they'll go back and replace the bass guitar part, or replace the guitar part, or re-sing it. What we call a scratch vocal, where you just lay down, where the singer might not be trying as hard as they might when they're actually going for broke. For the actual
exactly.
take.
That's right. Great. That's helpful for me to know. Maybe I'm the only one who was curious about that question, because I, with drumming, follow the music a lot, not necessarily lead. And as drummers,
I think a good drummer should.
Right.
I think a good drummer should be listening. Is the not really a joke, but some will say the best seat in the house is the drum throne for a show.
Right, I agree.
Like, wow, you're sitting back
That's right.
there and you've got these amps on both sides of you, and you're getting to listen to hopefully some really great players, and you're playing along, and you're adding to it and flourishing and stuff. But that's, drums are great. That's one of the best parts about it. But it needs to interact. I think you're right. It needs to interact with the music. So.
Can you say a little bit also about the mindset of performing live versus when you record in the studio, whether yourself or you're recording other? And I mean that in the sense of dealing with any kind of nerves or stress. Do you have any of that, or how
I've been doing this for years and years and years, and I still stress when I'm recording. I do. I own a studio. When I'm doing my own project, and I've got the producer working with me, and that record light goes on, and I don't care who you are. Those microphones are picking up every little nuance. So if you hit a fret just wrong, say on your guitar, and the string buzzes, it picks that up. So you can either fix it or you can restart again. And if you're singing, you can choose to try to sing it from start to finish, or you can punch it in as you go. A lot of people might not know that happens, but I think today most people know that sometimes songs aren't sung from
That's right.
start to finish. But I always try to. I try to.
Oh, that's great.
When I can.
That's great. Excellent. And then how about playing live? What's your mindset or any kind of prep with that?
Well, playing live for me is a lot less stressful, because if you make a mistake, you just keep moving.
Yeah. Right.
Most people don't hear it anyways. You might be the only one that picks it up. And I like the freeness of it, and the lack of pressure. Some people get what you'd call stage fright. I might do certain things where I might be a little jittery beforehand, but for the most part, no. Once the show starts,
you're going.
Well, you've done it enough. Right. Yeah. I can remember one of the first times I ever did play live in front of people, and I was quite nervous.
Sure. Yeah. What are some of those highlights for you so far? Because you got a long career to go, but career highlights with playing and or recording so far.
Well, I love one track that I did a while back on one of my own songs. It's now closed down, but I got to record it at Alaire Studios in upstate New York.
Wow.
And that had one of the best sounding rooms I'd ever stood in. And the Norah Jones album, Come Away With Me, was recorded there.
Yes.
And David Bowie recorded, I believe, the Heathen album there. There's other, I'm not dropping names here, but just to give you the scope of the studio. The mixing console that we used and recorded through was used on the Brothers in Arms album, Dire Straits, and it goes on and on and on. If you listen, and I think Andy Summers danced across it on every little thing she does this magic video. Yeah, so we got to go through that board,
awesome.
And that was a great experience to record with. And honestly, I just love. There's no one thing that sticks out playing live. I just like playing. I usually like playing the gigs where it's all original music. Yeah. For me. Yeah.
So, with music playing and in your studio recording, where do you want music to go for you? Where do you want all of this to? What's any goals that are there?
My main goal, honestly, is to just keep having the opportunity to help people, get projects done that they want, and if their goal is to just, they like to sing some songs and they want to play the songs for their friends or whatever, and that's what they want to do. Great. If they want to try to demo it off and become the next big thing, then I'm happy to help. What a privilege. For my own self, I just love still writing and recording and doing gigs when I can and getting out there and being a part of it. I've never tired of it.
It's definitely still a passion, it sounds
Yeah,
like.
still a
Yeah,
passion,
that's really great. That's really great. For people who are watching this in the future, maybe generations of musicians who are up and coming, or someone who wants to have their own studio, what advice would you give them in order to get to a place that you are and to have a successful business around that?
Again, I'd say that if you want to get into the business of music in any way, whether that's performing, whether that's audio engineering, and again, as we keep saying, you have to have some element of a big passion for it. I think it comes down to, it's a lot of hard work. It's a lot of hard work recording albums. You listen to a 3-minute song, 4 or 5 minute song, it's done. Well, that could have taken a lot longer than that to do it, and it would be a lot of, determination, and, hopefully it went smoothly, but we're dealing with technology, so the understanding of the technology, and I think also understanding that playing music in general is work. It is a business. It's a lot of hard work. And some of it can be the pay can be something that might be fulfilling emotionally. You might also make a lot of money doing it, but you might not. And if it's fulfilling you emotionally, then great,
And hopefully both, right?
And hopefully both.
Wouldn't that be cool, right? Awesome. Doug, this has been a pleasure. I've been wanting to get into a studio for a long time. Doug Hoyt, thank you so much for being on Musicians on the Record. We are at Sounds Like Music Recording Studio in South Portland, Maine. Call this guy. Doug,
Thanks for
pleasure.
having me on the show.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Well, I've been around and wanted you to know I've been taking chances, watching rivers flow. I've been walking by your house, had your lights down low. I've been making money, watching all my dimes. I've been waking early, making a difference this time. I'll be right there when you need me. Promise is a promise this time. And I won't be late for dances, 'cause my car won't start. Won't be late for nothing that leads me into your heart. I'll be sitting at your table. Promise is a promise this time. Why you never around when I'm ready to say what I just said? Something I'll figure out maybe later when you're out of my head. Well, I've been around and wanted you to know I've been taking chances, watching rivers flow. I'll be right there when you need me. Promise is a promise this time. I'll be sitting at your table.